I would like to take you back to a memory, one which I hope everyone in this room has in their hearts. I'm 7 years old. I've had a big day running around outside, making potions with leaves and mud, pretending to be a character in my own story. But it's time for bed. I've been tucked in by my parent. I'm warm, comfortable, but not ready to go to sleep. Mum has picked out some picture books, and I am excited. She starts to read, and I am thrilled. The story is great. I ask for another book and another, and slowly, after many, many books, I drift off to sleep. And I am not afraid to enter my dreamland. When I look back at these memories, I feel happy and content, knowing these stories were probably just entertaining. What I didn't know as a child was that there was so much more to this bedtime story. Each book I read as a child helped me grow into the person that I am today. And for my Year 12 project, I wanted to explore why this is, in the hope that I could write and illustrate my own picture book, which too could be shared with the next generation of children being read to as they fall asleep, maybe waking up with new knowledge that they can take with them into the rest of their lives. Before the start of Year 12, I was in the English countryside, where I had lots of free time, and I'd committed myself to not do what I really wanted to do, like most of my generation, was to be on my phone. Instead, I walked into the nearby forest, pulled out a travel-size watercolour kit and one paintbrush, and started to paint the nature around me. In this short time, I was able to have a great appreciation for nature, something that I hadn't had in a very long time. I think this is very common for many. We seem to find so little time to look at nature and say, wow. These moments of appreciation stuck with me in ways which I wouldn't until much later recognise. This experience also began my love for watercolour art, which previously I had never used. I had no clue what went into writing and illustrating a picture book. I was excited that I could use my love for art and storytelling, but I was also worried that the task might be too big. Coming into my final year of schooling, I was scared. Scared that my childhood was almost over. All these years I'd spent learning and growing, about to disappear into adulthood. And I think that in some way, this is why I reconnected with my inner child and wanted to revisit these books that I cherished so deeply. I read many picture books, libraries worth. And yes, I did get strange looks as I crouched to the children's section, flipping through the books. But now, in academic Year 12 fashion, I was taking notes on each small detail, trying to understand what made a great picture book. These books I'd been reading in the library stayed with me throughout my entire design process, as they showed me just how unique and powerful a book can be. I remember as I looked through these books, thinking how different they were since I too was in that library section as a child. Picture books have become such an important tool for learning about issues we face in today's world. Perhaps when I was a child, I didn't know what these books were teaching. But when I read a book named Little Koala about an animal who struggled to fit in because they were different, I knew that some child who feels left out because of who they are read this book and felt happy. And maybe their peers invited them to play hide and seek for the first time. This experience really empowered me, because from this, I knew that no matter how big the issue was that I wanted to address, it could be done, and it could be done in a way which is enjoyable for the reader, despite how complex the subject may be. However, despite how significant it was to read these children's picture books, I needed more expertise in the matter. So I found a children's picture book author named Amanda Graham and asked her to be my mentor. This, while sounding simple, was far from it. I have anxiety, so pressing the send button on an email to her for the first time was extremely daunting. But I am so glad I did, because throughout this entire process, she's been the one person I could turn to when I had questions. She taught me more than any other research could. We spent our meetings discussing relevant books, page layouts, my ideas, and so much more. For example, when I asked her if poetic structures were needed for writing a picture book, she told me that whilst they are nice, they often stunt a writer's freedom of expression and limit the amount of time the writer can spend on more important details. One key idea I kept coming back to during my research this year was the importance of the moral of the story in a children's picture book. I mean, why else would a book be read? And what better way to educate a child than a great book? I found that whilst picture books may not be clear as to what the moral is, there is always a moral being taught in all good books. It is just that as we grow older, these morals become clear. But to be developmentally appropriate for a child, these morals should be taught in a kind and easy to manage style. My goal was to find a way to use the moral of the story for good and empower the next generation of children to learn from my story and take it into the real world. Nearing the end of term 1, I came face to face with an issue I had been pushing to the back of my mind. I still didn't have an idea for my story. And believe it or not, without a story, you can't write a book. For some reason, I thought this idea would just come to me like a revelation, and it didn't. After many journal entries, I came to the realization that I was going to get nowhere if I didn't seek out the idea rather than just waiting for it like a package that would never arrive. I had to message the seller, aka myself, and ask for express shipping. This really halted my project, as I had to do something very hard in order to find my story. This was because I had to change my entire character idea, which was initially going to be my pet rabbit, Leo, who for the whole first term I'd been using as a subject for all my art. I wanted him to be with me through this process. But because I was so fixed that he was going to be in my story, I couldn't explore any other ideas. It was too much pressure to leave my comfort zone, but I had to. I wondered whether it was too late. It caused a bit of a breakdown, in fact. But I had to pull myself up with the help from my support network for my project, which included Kathy Bernard, my supervisor, my family, and my mentor, who, when I suggested a change of topic, agreed that it would be the right choice for working through my writer's block. This was an important decision that changed my project plan entirely. But I felt as if I was a term behind, and I urgently needed to push myself forward. To do this, I started a storybook writing course on Domestika, an online skill-sharing platform. I started this course in the hope that it would help me move forward, and after completing it, I ended up having this long-awaited revelation, and I felt relieved. I realized that I wanted to write about conservation. I mean, how didn't I think of it before? Ever since a child, I'd been interested in the subject, and ever since day one, when I was creating my first illustrations, I'd been admiring the beauty of nature. After completing this course and realising I wanted to focus on conservation for my topic, I had a path to follow. And even though I hoped somehow Leo would fit in with my narrative, he didn't. As many people probably know, especially Australians, wild rabbits are terrible for the Australian ecosystem. Once I knew what I wanted to write about, I talked to my mentor about how to continue, and she gave me some scaffolds for idea creation. From these, I wrote many 5-sentence stories and eventually narrowed them down to one, with the advice from my mentor and others I'd shared my ideas with. I decided on a story about deforestation and the impact it has on wildlife we often underappreciate. I needed further information to back up my idea, and sadly, my story was far too true. I wanted to research the effects of deforestation within South Australia. This was in the hope that my story would be set in a location which local readers would connect with. From my research, I found alarming statistics about the state of our local environment. The South Australian Mount Lofty ranges, that many of you know well, are under extreme threat from factors such as deforestation. The woodlands are quickly diminishing, and so are the woodland birds at a rate which is extremely painful to hear. These woodlands have declined to 1/10 of their original size. And in locations such as Mount Pleasant, Harndorf and Aldgate, the tree mortality rate is between 50 to 80% between 1985 and 2015. This has meant that the threatened native bird species who seek safety in these woodlands have declined by an average of 53%. And same goes for those common birds who we have grown up admiring, such as the blue wren, most notable for the male's bright blue feathers and songs. Whilst knowing this is scary, as it should be, there are things being done about it, such as grants from the state government going towards community initiatives for revegetation work. My story further developed from this knowledge into a narrative about the blue wren's song being lost after a tree is cut down. The moral of the story is that despite how young somebody is, they can take initiative to help their environment and leave a long-lasting impact which will affect future generations. I wanted to guide my community to be part of this story. The thing was, I didn't know how to do this. There were simply too many options, such as running a program for teaching people about conservation, running an art class, or a tree planting workshop. I thought I couldn't possibly choose one. I also wondered how I could involve my book in these community activities. I was stuck, and once again I was creating endless mind maps in my journal, trying to decide what I should do. Although I wanted to be independent in my decisions, as I often do, I decided to reach out for help from Grace Van Stuman, one of my teachers, who I knew would be the perfect person to ask for exciting ideas. With Grace's caring energy, suggestions, and help with planning, I discovered that I could make all my ideas into one activity that could involve the very audience I was hoping to inspire with my book. When I had my idea all planned out, I was able to initiate what I hoped to achieve within the school. I used teaching, storytelling, art, tree planting, all to help my community. This was only made possible because of the help I received from Sue Catlow, our gardening teacher, Jeremy Board, a primary school teacher, and his Year 3 class, who were the very age I was hoping to inspire. With the help from the Year 3 class and Jeremy Board, we were able to do our part in helping the ecosystem within our school and continue the conversation about what we can do to help our environment. To share my conservation message and further understand a child's development, I ran multiple lessons with the Year 3 class. First was a discussion and story-based teaching lesson, inspired by my research into teaching young children about big issues. Then we planted around 40 native tree species on the school grounds to increase biodiversity. And finally, to help the children understand what they had achieved, a traditional walled-off watercolour art lesson, in which they all individually painted the plant that they had planted. And also, what the tree would look like in 10 years, so that they really understood what lasting impact reforestation has on the environment. I had two main hopes for these lessons: to continue the conservation efforts and also to use my message for teaching. This was that I believe children must be empowered without sad statistics in order for them to want to actively help the world around them. Both my goals were achieved, but I also achieved something else. I was able to witness something amazing. The children who at the start of the lessons were hyperactive, maybe known as the troublemakers, when given the opportunity to go outside and create art, suddenly became the most engaged students. And so this idea of storytelling and active learning really did work. They were excited to learn and help, asking questions and having fun. Something I discovered from my education, I'm sure many other teachers have witnessed, is a child whose potential flourishes when being able to create. I was one of these kids, and what is amazing is that now I can see how this actually helped my education. This discovery was empowering. Art has always been my outlet, perhaps my form of meditation. And so, whilst researching for my book, which meant little active learning, I was able to continue because I could create art, which was just as important as wordy information. One downside to art being a major aspect of my project was that after hours upon hours of learning how to use watercolour, which some may know as a very hard medium to master, I found my love for art slowly slip away. Creating art became a chore rather than a hobby. When I was creating my final illustrations, there were times when I thought I would never finish them and that I didn't like how they turned out. This is common with projects and jobs. You can focus so much energy into something that you love that you forget why you ever loved it in the first place. I began to find art as stressful as any other research, and I was falling behind in my timeline for finishing my book. One day, as I was painting, tired and unenthused, I decided to put some records on, light some candles, and relax. It was a weird experience. I suddenly found peace in the process. I looked at what I was painting and thought how far I had come. At the start of the year, I was painting blurry images with a travel-sized watercolour set, and now I had in my hands the best brushes, the best paint, the best paper, and I was creating images with layers of depth and precision. I may not be a professional artist, but I'm creating something that my past self would be proud of, and this makes me feel content. My inner child who could only draw stick figures was smiling. I had found joy again, and I spent the rest of the illustration process happy and empowered, knowing that it would all work out and I had tried my very best. All we can do as creators of anything is try our best, which, whilst being a cliche, is extremely true. I and many other people in this world focus too hard on perfection, without realizing just how far we have come. The same goes for educators or teachers, educators or parents, who may not realize amongst the stress of life just how impactful that they can be, and have been for a child. That one book they read to their child the other day goes so much further than they might know. Before starting my project, I had it in my mind that everyone had experienced having books read to them, so I thought my message would be easy to share. However, after a survey I conducted during the year, I found that there were a vast number of adults who had never been read to, or had less than 10 picture books in their house growing up. This saddened me, but I had a thought. Even though these people may have not had this experience, how great would it be if they could be the first in their family? And from my experience, being the reader is just as fulfilling as being the one read to. It is never too late to change a child's life. So if you can, as a parent or caregiver, pick up a book and read to your child. This year, I've learned hundreds of reasons why this will change a child's lives for the better. With this rejuvenated spirit for my project, and having finished all my illustrations, I now needed to print my final picture book, as it was almost the end of term 3. I had to scan the illustrations and learn InDesign, which is a layout and publishing program. InDesign is not an easy program to use, so after hours of deliberating on the dimensions and the shape of the book, I was ready to test print. I was ready to test print using a commercial printer that was made available to me through a local non-for-profit business. Using this type of printer involved detailed testing with a technical assistant and trying out different paper, which I wanted to be recycled. Otherwise, why was I writing a book about the negative effects of deforestation? There were many frustrations during the printing process, such as numerous printer jams, which left me searching through a gigantic printer and figuring out why the light was flashing red. One print run, as I sat staring at the printer, hoping that its light wouldn't flash that hideous red, the light went green. And what I saw emerging was my book. Despite having the printer technician standing next to me, I started jumping up and down, holding my book in utter joy. After settling down, I looked through my book, flipping through all the pages. It was a truly wonderful feeling of completion. All those hours I'd spent painting, writing, researching, and printing were worth it. I had done it, and finally I felt calm, knowing I had a real book in my hands that I would happily share with the world around me. Now let me take you back to a memory. We're tucked in bed, and our parent has a new book to read. It is called When the Wren Stopped Singing. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the Paramonk people, the original custodians of the Mount Lofty Ranges, with which this book is associated. Elsie and her granny loved to sit under the beautiful tree outside their home and listen to the wren's song. Granny, I could listen to the wren's song forever. Granny held Elsie softly in her arms. Elsie, did you know there was a time when the wren stopped singing? Said Granny. Really? Why? Well, when I was your age, I would go outside every day and sit under a tree, and like you, I would listen to the wren sing. But one day, as I walked outside, something terrible was happening. What was happening? There were big machines and strangers with axes cutting down the trees, and the wrens were so scared they flew away. Did they come back? No, the wrens didn't come back, and when the machines and strangers with axes left, there was silence, no songs. All that was left was a tree stump. I missed the wren singing, So I tried to bring them back. How? I called out for them, but there was no reply. I even left food for them, but still they didn't return. I didn't know why, so I asked my dad, and he told me that the wrens needed a tree to feel safe. So I decided that the only way they would return is if I grew a tree. Did you? Yes. And from a seed grew a small tree, and slowly the tree grew bigger and stronger and taller. After many years, the wrens hadn't returned. I was losing hope. But one day, when I was sitting under the tree, I heard a sound. What was it? I didn't know. I looked up, and suddenly I saw a flash of blue. The wrens had returned. And guess what? What? They never left, and they never stopped singing their songs. And here is one more story. A Year 12 student named Sophie decided to write and illustrate a children's picture book. But she didn't know how. She was worried it would be too hard. But she knew she had something to share. She couldn't think of a story. She couldn't use watercolor art paint. She couldn't get a printer to work. But one day, after a year of ups and downs, she printed a book. And maybe one day a child will read her book and wake up the next day wanting to plant a tree. Thank you. Are there any questions? Just up the front.
Well done, Sophie. Could you talk about your illustrations and how long they took you?
Yeah, they took a very long time. So it kind of depended on what the illustrations were, like how detailed they were. But I would say on average they took at least like 6 to 8 hours. Some of them even more, sometimes days. And yeah, if I was to add them all up, I'm not sure, I haven't done that, but it would probably be days, like a lot of days. It took a very long time. Yeah, sorry, I'll just wait for the mic just so that the recording can hear it.
What age group is your book aimed at?
My book's from 5 to 7.
5 to 7.
So
Did you test it on children?
Yeah, I actually, before my whole book was printed, I still had a book which was basically a book just not fully printed, which I read to the Year 3 class. That was in the first lesson, the introduction lesson. So that was part of my introduction, which is based on, I did a lot of research into storytelling as a means for education, especially for young children. So I used that as part of my discussion. So I would read the book, ask some prompts, and get the children to respond. And from that, I would have a discussion with them. And yeah, from my research, like I've seen some really amazing numbers about how that actually does something and changes the entire way that a child learns how to like act in the world. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, and what kind of feedback did they give you about your story?
Well, I'm not sure if it has anything to do with it, but they became quite comfortable with me after that. And as soon as I mentioned the fact that we were planting trees and going outside, they were very excited. In the week leading up to it, I had quite a few kids when I was around the school come up to me like, "Oh, Sophie, we're planting the trees this week," and stuff. They were very excited. And Grace told me that when her child came home, she said that he had talked about the book, so maybe that's a bit of it. But I found that it really engaged the students. Like before the start of it, they were a bit put off. They didn't really know how to act or talk. But after I read the book, they were so excited to share their experiences and their suggestions. And like, because that was a story that could involve them, they really wanted to be part of it, I think. Yeah.
Sophie, great
Ready?
job. Are you planning on publishing more copies of your book or selling them?
I haven't thought that far ahead yet. I have a few books that I'm just giving out to people at the moment, but yeah, I haven't thought about that yet. Maybe in the future, we'll see. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Is there a particular spot you painted your pictures?
Sorry, could you repeat that one?
Is there a particular spot you painted your pictures, like under a tree or something?
Yeah, I actually, I did a lot of painting outside in my garden. I pulled out like a little easel and everything. I had it all set up. But I also spent a lot of time in my room where I had my record player and all my candles and stuff. So that was quite nice. But I also took a lots of reference photos that might be to do with it during the school, which was actually great. The school has so many trees, so many. It was great. There's lots of good reference pictures. Yeah. Not sure if that one answers it, but thanks.
Hi, Sophie.
Hi.
Well done. That was really, really good. I'm a music and candle fan myself.
Yeah.
So I love that you used the music with the candles. So I guess that helped to get you into a flow state to be creative. My question is, what music did you listen to? If you can remember.
There was lots. Phew. There's a whole pile, so I can't know. I recently got before when I was in England, I got a few records. Like I got lots of Beatles records, like a number of them. And I got a new Smiths record, the Meat is Murder one. And yeah, I've like, there's too many. Led Zeppelin. I have I also got, sorry, I can't rap. I got lots, basically, yeah. And it was very fun. Like, I feel like it actually helps you continue because when you're like putting a new song on, you have a moment to stop and feel excited. So yeah.
Congratulations, Sophie. Really enjoyed your reading of your book, and what a beautiful, beautiful book you've made. And it was great to learn about how you put it all together and all the other things you did in the community too. I'm just wondering, after that big experience, how do you think that will shape what you do in future years?
I think the process was really impactful, but I think just having the guts to finish it and continue was probably the biggest bit. Because before this year, I wasn't exactly the type to follow through with a lot of things. So having to write a book that's something is so physical that you constantly need to be working on, I think that's what I've learned. And I'm not sure whether that means I'm going to continue writing books, but it's definitely given me like the strength and the power to continue and find ways to continue. So before, if I was feeling down or I wasn't in the mood or unenthused, that would be it. That would be when I go to bed or start scrolling. But now, when I'm doing something and I'm in a state of mind which isn't good, I'll be like, let's at least try to do something that will make me feel better. And that's actually helped me a lot more than just outside of school, but like just in schoolwork, everything in my life, just taking the effort to go, I'm not going to stay here, I'm going to go and do something, make myself feel better. Yeah. Yeah.
Any particular like books that were huge inspirations for your book?
Ooh, there was lots. I mean, of course, there was like Julia Donaldson, but the first books that really inspired me, because I was like, that was my whole childhood, was Beatrix Potter. I loved Beatrix Potter. I have many books. I'm not afraid to say at this age, I still have many Beatrix Potter books. So yeah, probably Beatrix Potter. And Dr. Seuss, which is not like my book, but still very inspiring. Yeah. Thanks. some thank yous. I would like to thank my family who have been there for me, bringing me constant cups of tea and cheering me on, even when times were tough. Thank you, Amanda. You've helped me in so many ways. I will forever be grateful for your expertise. And lastly, thank you to my teachers, to Rose and Eleanor for guiding us through this major part of our schooling, to Kathy for endless words of encouragement, to Aaron for being the best guardian, quite literally, and to Grace for always lighting up the room when she walked in. And to all the other teachers who have stuck with me and the rest of my class, despite how stressful times may have been. Thanks.